welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I invite people virtually into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting with Vince. He's the author of My Pursuit of Beauty, amazing book. And he talks about how it's like to be a cosmetic chemist, certified nose, and talks about going from creating all these cosmetic products to experiencing the glam and the glitz that is in Hollywood. And as he says, the bat crazy. So, Vince, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Melissa. How are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
We're good. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little about yourself first.
Well, to your point, I'm a cosmetic chemist and a perfumer. Been doing it about 25 plus years now. So that means that we develop everything as far as hair care, skin care, bath and body, manicure, pedicure, baby products, and of course fine fragrances and everything in between. So we have an R&D lab that we have in Capistrano Beach, California, which is about an hour south of Los Angeles, and then a manufacturing plant out in Tempe, Arizona, where we scale up everything. So it's really a full service, concept to launch. So if you're a private person, a doctor, a celebrity, a retailer that wants to put a brand together, we take you through the whole entire process and kind of hold your hand through the whole process as well.
Now, you had always wanted to own your own company, but you went through a lot of different companies to finally get to the point where you were able to have your own kind of like label brand. So Let's talk about working with all the different companies that you've worked with.
Well, I'm very insubordinate, so it didn't work out. I was knew that from day one. I never been actually employed by a company in my life. I opened my corporation in 1995 when I was 20. So I've always been a consultant, even though I worked for other people. I never actually been on a W-2 or that kind of thing. So I'm just not wired that way. I've been, I think, wired as an entrepreneur since I was 11, 12, 13, 14. So I haven't been able to shift that. So I'm not really good at taking directions. I'm a phenomenal collaborator. I love working with people and doing things together. It just wasn't like, oh, you got to be here at 8. I'm like, no, I'll be there at 10. You got to wear a shirt and tie. Well, no, I'm not going to wear a shirt and tie. So I wasn't even being like, a smart ass. I'm just not wired that way to be able to not be on my own schedule and do what I want to do and when.
Now I actually love the way you decided you wanted to create cosmetics and perfumes. Tell us a little backstory about that. What happened in your childhood?
Well, a little embarrassing story, but it's totally true. To your point, I grew up watching The Young and the Restless with my grandmother as early as 5 or 6 years old. And I used to just watch it with her every day. And they had a fictitious cosmetic company called Jabot. That was actually what they did on the show for a living. And I got interested in it from the very beginning. And I remember being literally at 6 or 7 and using my sister's Easy Bake Oven to try and pretend like I was making products into it. And it stuck with me. And my whole entire childhood into early adulthood, I never shifted from what I wanted to do. I never had a different thought, a different career in my mind. So that was then about 10th, 11th grade in high school. I had a very good friend, Stacy, who was a brilliant graphic artist, and she developed my logo for my company when I was in 11th grade. And that logo is still what I use 35 years later for my company. So it really was from the very, very beginning of my childhood. Wow,
I just love that. Now, you also were a big Dynasty fan as well, correct?
Right, which made things even worse, right? Because the young, again, I was born in 74, so Dynasty came out in 81. So I was only about 7 or 8 years old. So between The Young and the Restless and the stuff of Dynasty, the money, the power, all that kind of stuff, that wasn't really a great way to shape my life, but it did. So I thought I had to develop beauty products and also show throw a champagne glass at somebody as well, and have a cat fight. But it was really it was really more about the stuff and wanting to say, oh, I wanted to be able to achieve that and have the private jet and have the high rise building. I don't have any of that, by the way, so that hasn't worked yet. But that was what shaped all of what I wanted to do, which probably wasn't a very good model for growing up. That's for sure.
Now, you did have a lot of ups and downs in relationships and as far as money goes as well. Can you share some of that story? Because we don't want to give away too much in the book.
Yeah, well, to your point, I got in the car and I drove I grew up on the Jersey Shore in South Jersey on the ocean. And one day I said, I'm just gonna go. And I got in the car and I drove, and I really didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if I was going to Denver or Nashville or Texas or California or Chicago, and I just kept driving as I was thinking, and then eventually I got to Malibu, California, and that's like on the ocean. So it was either there or next stop was Tokyo. If I kept going, so that was the only option. So that's where I ended up, and I just lived off my credit cards for almost 2 years, robbing Peter to pay Paul and moving them back and forth to keep myself going, which is again another very bad idea to do. It took me like 7-8 years to pay it all off eventually, but that's how I did it. I mean, I didn't have any cash in my pocket. I just happened to have credit, so that's what I used to get through the first 3 or 4 years.
But it seems like that you had a lot of struggles that I think a lot of people can actually identify with. You had body dysmorphia. You had, I do not know how to pronounce this, and I'm so sorry.
Trichotillomania, right?
Yeah. So tell us what that is first.
So trichotillomania is a hair pulling disorder. So you literally pull out your hair, and it's kind of in the same category like cutters and people that bite their nails. So it's a OCD disorder. And as I mentioned, I was very close to my grandmother, and she passed away when I was 11. And I started pulling my hair out about a week after that. So I had that my whole entire life. I still have it now. It doesn't go away. I learned how to control it a little bit. But a lot of people have it. It actually affects mostly women. I think it's high 99% women versus men. So it's a much more of a female disorder. And normally it could be hair on your head, eyelashes, eyebrows, leg hair, armpit hair, pubic hair. I mean, everyone does everything. It's really a unusual disorder. But it's that triggered, to your point, a lot of genetic dysmorphic disorder, and that's kind of what the title of the book is about. Was my pursuit of beauty, not only trying to find it in myself, which was always a pursuit for me, but also doing it for other people in the beauty industry. So I had many plastic surgeries, and it's kind of a joke because I come from a very strong-willed Italian. I'm 100% Italian, from an Italian family in New Jersey, and I always tried to change my nose and my face and the whole thing. And every single time I came out of surgery, I pretty much looked the same. So my friends used to joke and say, "Did the doctors put you to sleep and just smack you around and then put bandages on you and wake you up?" Because I pay for all these surgeries and I end up looking the same. So if you look at pictures of me as 20 years ago, I look the same. So it's it didn't work out. None of it worked out for me.
Wow. So why did you decide to do all these plastic surgeries if you were just looking the same and you're having multiple plastic surgeries?
The real reason, which is again another embarrassing reason, but it go back to Dynasty. There was the first gay character ever on TV. His name was it's Stephen Carrington was the character's name, and so I didn't know I was gay at the time, but I found out later on, 20 years later, that I was gay. I wasn't sure, but I knew there was something that I related with him, and I wasn't sure. I didn't know what it was because I was too young. But long story short, 3 or 4 years into the series, there was a storyline that he was on an oil rig explosion, and he couldn't be found, and then 2 seasons later he came back as another actor, and in my opinion, the second actor was much better looking. So in the storyline was he had plastic surgery, and that's why he was a whole different character. And in real life, the other guy's contract just ran out, but they had a new character. So in my mind, I'm like, oh, you could do this. You could actually change your face and look more handsome or look better. That's where I got the idea from, and I couldn't afford to do it until I was in my very early 30s. It took me actually long. I didn't do anything, in my teens or my 20s, so it took me to about 33 or 34 years old where I finally started, doing it. But again, I look exactly the same, so it's pretty funny, actually, at this point.
I think that I love the way that you can laugh about it, but some of these surgeries you've gotten really sick off of, maybe not the surgeries, but you've gotten really sick almost to the point of dying.
Yeah, and again, it was triggered from the surgery, but I got MRSA a couple times, MRSA, which is staph infections. I got that 2 or 3 times in my life, and one time I had it really, really bad where it was like I was down for the count. They called in the priest, and it was like I was ready to tuck and roll. So it was a bad one, but a very new medicine called vancomycin saved my life, which is what they had to actually get released from the FDA because it wasn't being used yet. So I had to wait 3 days for this medicine to come in, and it finally got airlifted in, and I made it out of it. But it was really tough. So I stopped doing the surgeries after that. That's my final one.
Now, on a side note, for one of the surgeries, when you got MRSA, they actually didn't put it on your chart, correct? They put it as gender reassignment, correct?
Right. I even forgot about that. Yeah, but that I actually I got the MRSA, started in my belly button, and it went all the way up to my chest. My whole everything from neck and below was infected. And long story short, it made my chest really, really inflated because I had an infection there. And they actually had me on the chart as a not transgender, but a sex change operation. So they were treating me as a sex change operation patient for 3 days before we knew they had the wrong chart. So that was the other problem. So that's another just ridiculous thing that happened to me, where you kind of hear those stories where you go in to have your leg cut off and they cut off the wrong leg, right? Because they don't put it on the chart properly. Hey, you really have to be your own advocate in the hospital, have a very good friend or a family member, there for you. I mean, there's mistakes that can happen pretty easily.
Wow, I can only imagine. Now, we're going to take a brief commercial break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about all that you've done in the beauty industry, how you've worked with people and everything. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, here's our commercial.
Okay.
Do you feel betrayed by life, your body, or by someone that you love? You are not alone, and you are not weak or overly emotional for feeling the way that you do. Betrayal is one of the most overwhelmingly painful experiences to navigate because it strikes at the core of who you are and what you are worth. No matter how gutted you feel, there is hope. You can flourish, not in spite of your experience, but because of it. I know. After 23 years of marriage, my world was shattered when I found out that my husband had been cheating on me with 5 different women for 15 years. I lost everything that day, my identity, my worth, and the future I had worked so hard to create. While it was a long and arduous journey back to myself, today I know who I am, what I want, and I am happier and more confident than I ever was before. I've got what I call naked self-worth, which is the ability to just see, know, and love yourself for who you are, not for what you accomplish or for who you are in relation to others. No matter what has shattered your heart, if you're ready to get clear on who you are, what you want, and to learn how good life really can be, then Life Choreography is for you. Even if you feel too old or are too busy because you have kids at home and you're in charge of everything. Life Choreography is a comprehensive 5-month, 5-step program that empowers you to strip out of your labels, roles, and scripts, and to reveal yourself as you are, not as you think you should be. To learn more, go to nakedselfworth.com and download your free guide that shows you how to untangle yourself from the past, reclaim your sexy, and start re-choreographing life on your own terms so you can love and be loved for exactly who you most authentically are.
And we are back talking with Vince, who wrote My Pursuit of Beauty. This book right here is amazing. I mean, guys, you need to pick it up because this is a page turner. I just can't. Every time something happened in your life, I was like, that really didn't happen. It's like everything that could have happened to you did happen to you.
Unfortunately, it's all true. I had a ghostwriter for the book as well, Mickey Goodman out of Atlanta, Georgia. She's a brilliant writer. I have every learning disability you can imagine, so it was very hard. I couldn't write it myself personally, but I mean, every word in the book is mine. But to your point, when I was telling the story to my ghostwriter, she was like, "This can't be. This didn't really happen." And then we just would go on for fun and Google things. She's like, "Oh my God, there it is. It did happen to you," and blah blah blah. So it was she couldn't believe it. It should have been fiction.
Yeah, and to that point, your relationships that you just kept throwing money at people, was that because you didn't feel worthy of love?
Yeah, exactly. I was really unsure of myself at the time, so I always thought I didn't like the way I looked, so that was always kind of part of the issue. So I always thought I had to and I've always had really very overly handsome boyfriends, kind of models and actors. So I always had these really good looking guys, which is great, but I didn't know what they were there for. So I always was kind of throwing money at them and stuff and overdoing it. And of course, I realized later on that was all ridiculous. But I did it all during my 20s, though. Yeah.
Wow. So there's a couple of scenes in the book that I want to talk about. The one that I thought was the most funniest one was the mermaid statue when you guys got pulled over. So talk about that one.
I had a life size, about 6 foot mermaid torso. It was a torso actually on a board, and from an artist named Judy Carson out here in LA. She's a brilliant sculptress, and I just love marine life and everything. Anyway, so it was a plaster sculpture, and I finally moved. We wrapped it up like you would any piece of artwork and put it in the trunk, and it's only a torso, but it's like a 6 foot long torso. And immediately after we left my building, we got pulled over by the cops, and it was like really aggressive. We only were going like 15, 20 miles an hour. We knew we weren't speeding, and they pulled the guns on us and everything to get out of the car and put your hand out. What the hell's going on? They thought the mermaid was a dead body in the trunk wrapped up, and we didn't close the trunk properly. So it just was like most bizarre things you can imagine.
And talking about, you also has a lot of chance meetings with people that you actually kind of like meeting Eric Braeden from The Young and the Restless on a plane. That was awesome.
Yeah. Again, back, and now he was part of the show that I watched, growing up, and we ended up being sitting, right next to each other. So that was another fluke, as well.
So let's talk about some of the things that we talked about MRSA, being fired from your job. We've already talked about. How about when you were dealing with depression and you ended up having to go in the hospital for a while?
Yeah, I had a lot of depression growing up, and again, and trichotillomania is kind of part of it. It's they kind of doctors are kind of like now wrote white papers about this. Really, a lack of serotonin in the brain, which is what causes this disorder. And the same thing again with cutting and other kind of disorders as well. So with that being said, the lack of serotonin will give you depression sometimes as well. And like you said, I had a lot of tremendous ups and downs. In my life, and I was suicidal at one point. I was thinking that it wasn't real, but actually it was, and it put me in a hospital for about a 10-day stay to kind of regroup and get some help. So I've been through all of it for sure.
So how did you overcome all this and still be able to, put it aside, or maybe not put it aside, but put it out of your mind to be able to still create your company?
That's what I was saying. Melissa, I think you have to be wired that way or not. I do get asked all the time about entrepreneurship and what do you do or not do, and there's many times. There's probably hundreds of times I could think that I wanted to give up, and then like the following morning, you're ready to go. Like for example, I'm a big, massive fourth generation Philadelphia Eagles fan, and when the team loses on a Sunday, you hate them and say I'm never gonna watch them again. And then Monday morning, like, okay, let's see what they're gonna do next week. So it's kind of the same thing. I would kind of bounce back the following day, and just keep going. But I think you're either wired that way or you're not. You can't really. I don't think you really can teach entrepreneurship because you have to be. It really have to be afraid of nothing. You got to be afraid to. You can't be. You have to be willing to have the ups and downs and have no money sometimes and have a lot sometimes and not have a steady paycheck. And some people just cannot fathom the idea of not having a twice a month paycheck and whatever. And I just don't. I have no interest in that because I can't control what I'm doing if I do it that way. So I think it's just a way you have to be either wired that way or not.
So let's talk about creating your company. Like you said, your friend in high school did your graphics, which you're still using today. So you obviously have loyalty to people. But what did you learn from each particular company that you were with, that you were a consultant with?
Well, I've always took something away for sure. Again, it was always, mostly in the beauty industry. So I was always kind of learning, what needed to be done. For example, my company is called Turnkey Beauty. And it's the name is for just the way it sounds, because as I was going through my career, like if you came to me as, hey, my name is Melissa, I want to put a skincare line together, and you need formulations. But of course, what you need also then is a cap, a bottle, an actuator, a box. You need the copy, you need regulatory review, you need the whole thing. So as I went through my career, I learned that I was able to pull in every piece of what's needed to get somebody's project from fruition to launch. So in the very beginning, I just was working on formulation, but I'm like, well, why would I just do formulations when I know, anybody creating a new brand needs to have everything. So that's kind of the main thing I took away, is how to work with packaging people and how to understand dye lines and mechanical drawings and CAD drawings, and then also, of course, the formulation work and stability and all the regulatory stuff to go. It's really, really involved to get a product line to the market. It could take almost 2 years to get a moisturizer into the market by the time you go through all the regulatory testing and review and that kind of stuff. So I've always pulled a piece from every company I consulted for to try to build what I have now.
I love that because I mean, and you already said you were dyslexic, so all that paperwork has got to be like. How did you get it to work to where? Did you have people helping you with the paperwork?
Well, I always joke that if it wasn't for spell check, I'd be bankrupt because when I first started in 1995, spell check is kind of was just coming out, and if I didn't have that, people would think I was had that I was an idiot because I just write I write so bad. So that's that was good timing for me, but honestly, I learned how to do everything myself. I hate it. Don't get me wrong, but for example, I'll just kind of just show you. For fun here, this is something that we're. How do I just show you? I'll give you like an example here. So this is what a formulation looks like. So I'm working off of these kind of grids, my whole life, which is very, very hard for me to kind of see it the proper way or put the numbers in the proper way. So I check. I double check, I triple check, and I quadruple check everything I do. Even if it's sending out a FedEx, I have to make sure every single thing is lined up. So, but I think it's made me a lot more successful because I am really anal, making sure that nothing is wrong most of the time.
So, how big is your company?
Oh, we're not that big. We're pretty boutique. There's only 10 of us in total. We do. When I mentioned we take products from beginning to end, it could take anywhere from 18 months to 2 years. So we only take about 4 to 6 clients every 18-month cycle. So we keep it pretty small, but it's very, very exclusive. And we work with the biggest celebrities in the world and the biggest doctors in the world that you can imagine. So we keep it that way on purpose. We don't really want to grow bigger than that because one of the sales, caveats are that if the people are hiring that they're actually getting me to work on their projects. So if I took too many on, I wouldn't be able to be the one actually doing the formulation work. I'd have to sub it out to my interns or that kind of thing. And it's not, they're not really look. So when they're looking for my company, they're looking for me. So I want to try and keep it that way if I can.
Now let's talk about. Do you still have their skincare line that you created in Poland for Europe?
Yes. It's called Caviar and Diamond. And it's on my website right now, which is vincenzoskincare.com, and it's there to be right now, and it's a beautiful product line that you feel and see the results anywhere between 15 to 30 seconds because it's called instant gratification skincare, meaning that you have results right away. So that took me about 7 years to put together, but it's finally out there and ready to go. We're winning all kinds of awards with it and getting a lot of press, but it just came out and it's all available as of now as well.
So is it just available in Europe? Because I know in the book you said that you took it to Europe because you knew the price point was going to be too high for people here in America.
We actually were launching it originally in Dubai. So we actually made the product line for the UAE, for the Dubai market. And that's where we were launching it. But with the pandemic, as soon as we were ready to launch, the distributor we had actually folded up shop. So we never ended up over to now. To your point, it's just on my website. Now we're still trying to find a home for it somewhere in the UAE. It is expensive, but for what it actually does and the results people get, they don't mind spending it because it's very efficacious how it works.
So it's got to be so much. I'm trying to think of the word and it just left my mind, but it's got to be gratifying for you to see not only are you creating products for somebody else, but you're also creating your own line as well.
Right, and that was my goal since I was a kid. So I just kind of started doing it for other people to make a living, but I ended up really enjoying it, and I still love doing it. And between 1995 and now, I launched over 300 brands in 25 years. So it's been a lot of work for other people, but I still have my dream to have my own line and getting it out there, and making that successful as well. My goal when I was a kid was to be Estee Lauder, Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, Chanel, Louis Vuitton, name for myself. So that's what I'm still working for. So hopefully, many, many years after I'm long and gone, that the brand will still be out there, like the ones that are now that are over 100 years old, right? Like the Chanel and Lauders and that kind of stuff.
Speaking of Louis Vuitton, that plays a huge part in pretty much a part of your book.
Yeah, probably my tornado I was in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have a Louis Vuitton fetish, I guess, if you will. So it's one of my favorite brands. And I one of the things that happened to me also, I was stuck in a F5 tornado in Iowa during one of my traveling things, and I made it to an overpass with a bunch of people that we anchored ourselves down with snow chains. But anyway, my rental car got sucked up in the air, and all my luggage went flying up in the air. So all my Louis Vuitton went flying into the cornfield, and I was screaming while this tornado was going on, saying, "Oh my Louis, Louis, Louis!" And the lady thought there was somebody in my car. She said, "Oh my God, is there a person in the car?" I'm like, "No, it's just my luggage." She said, "God damn it!" She's like, "You scared the hell out of me." I'm like, "The luggage is more important than a child." No, it's scary.
Now, do you have your book with you right now?
I do.
Do you have a part that you want to read out of it?
Oh my God, I would have no idea. Just pick something randomly, or something. I don't even know.
Just something randomly.
Let's see. Trying to think. I know. You actually set me up for a good ending here. I think I'll read you the very, very end because it kind of sums everything up here. If I can find it. Let's see here. Nobody moves. Because this kind of is the whole point of everything we talked about, Melissa. So I said and I'm gonna say the word Auschwitz in here, which is the concentration camp, and I'll tell you real fast before I read this. So one of the things I did that changed my life. I'm personally a World War II history buff, so I know everything about. I can take anybody education-wise, through World War II, whether it's from the German side, the American side, the Japanese side, Soviet Union side, whatever. And long story short, I spent a night in Auschwitz at the concentration camp, and it was something that you're not allowed to do, but just being totally transparent, I bribed a security guard to let me stay overnight in the camp to try and just give my respects and do the whole thing. So that was a very, very life-changing moment. That's a whole chapter in the book just by itself, but the reason why that's in the last paragraph of my book. So I say, I've also come to realize that beauty, like the wild yellow buttercups blooming at Auschwitz, can thrive in the most hostile environments. It is within all of us, just waiting to emerge. And what that actually means, what I saw and experienced when I was at Auschwitz was, and I even told the people that worked there, they didn't even realize it themselves. When you're on the camp, which is miles long, there's the fences that are there, and there's very distinctive indentations in the ground, which were unfortunately they were execution pits and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So where the actual fence stops on the outside of the camp is just regular grass, the whole thing. 1 centimeter on the other side of the fence on the campsite where the execution happens, there's beautiful buttercups that are growing all through the execution pits, through near the gas chambers and the whole thing. So, and it actually, when you walk the camp, it stops right at the fence where no murders actually have happened. So something I had noticed, and meaning that it was just kind of something like that was amazing to kind of see. That I think it just is like I don't know how to really kind of unpack it. It was just really an unbelievable experience. But people that worked there never even realized. I mean, it's the same soil, it's the same grass. It's only that far away from each other from where the fence ends, and it's very distinctive, like kind of like a line that you can see the difference from where inside the camp versus the outside of the camp.
I love how you just read that because I had kept going back on my Kindle because I have the book in the Kindle, but I was like, I want to read that part if he doesn't read it. And it's so weird that you read that part because I actually had it open so that I could read it. But let's talk about your experience at Auschwitz because that is huge. I mean, you didn't want to get all these blankets. You wanted to live like they lived.
Yeah, I always got to be kind of really careful when I tell the story because I don't ever want to be disrespectful to anybody. And I wasn't going there for for just like looky-loo reasons. I'm personally 100% Italian, Roman Catholic. I'm not even Jewish. And it's got nothing to do with it. But I had a fascination with just how one person, being Hitler for this matter, was able to manipulate a whole continent to do this stuff, which I think is just disgusting. So I've always been kind of studying him, and not in a positive way, but in a negative way. Obviously, studying him and how this actually could happen. So I've always wanted to see. Give my respect and see these camps and kind of do the whole tour and just kind of give my respect. And that's really what I did. But I wanted to have, and you can't say one day, me at Auschwitz is equivalent to anybody that went through that horrible experience. But I did try and do it ostensibly as I can. My current, my fiance is a fashion designer and a and a designer in general. So he actually made me, after researching, we made me these like pajamas that were the same type of fabric, the same lightness. So I once I bribed a security guard, I stayed overnight in one of the barracks with the pajamas, with no shoes. I mean, of course, I gave no electronic advice. I gave my cell phone and everything to the guard just in case something were to happen. And it was a horrible night. It was like, it went down like 35 degrees. It poured rain, but I didn't quit, and I stayed. And it was. I don't even know how to explain it. All I can tell you was the day before I did it, I was one person, and the following morning I was a different person. And that was really kind of what this book really kind of sums up. And to your point, Melissa, too, about the actual chapter, that's the very, very end of my book. And my book actually was done, completed, and we were in final editing. We're getting ready to print. And I actually, this only happened about 2.5 years ago when I went to the camp. And I actually made everybody stop the printing of the book to get this chapter in there because it was so important to me. Mm-hmm. So it really was just, I just kind of left the following day not caring about stuff anymore, about tangible stuff, about how I looked, mm-hmm. about how I felt. And it was only about 2 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. And it was so really the biggest shift in my life that I can ever remember. And I remember laying there and reading. There's all kinds of writing on the wall, some in Hebrew, some in Polish, some in Russian. And of course, I had no idea what I was reading, but it just was the experience of knowing. Like, I have goosebumps right now just telling you the story. Mm-hmm. So, but it's just very hard to explain. But I wouldn't advocate anybody go do it. But I just did it because I wanted just to have the experience and give them the respect of what I studied. Overall, I minored in Holocaust studies in college. So I always had an interest in just, again, how it happened, why it happened, and how to stop it from never happening again. So that's kind of really what it was about.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you said afterwards with the guard was like hardly anybody makes it the whole night because apparently like maybe 20 so people had tried it.
Yeah, exactly. So we don't know if it's an urban legend or not, but this security guard was working there for about 15 years, and he said, about a dozen people have tried to do it and wanted to do it, and most of the people that did it were people that from family that actually passed away there. And he said that he's not aware of anybody actually going through the whole entire night and doing it. And I wouldn't I wouldn't call it scary. It was almost more spooky, but more comforting. And I didn't feel scared. I just felt like you definitely felt that what happened there for sure. I mean, like, you knew it. I mean, even if you didn't know, even if you went there blindly, you just feel the energy. I mean, there was millions of people that got murdered there, in a matter of like a 1 mile radius. So you just can't, feel that energy. And that's where I went again back to those buttercups, where I would be looking through the camp and just saying, how is this like stopping right at the, if you give me 1 second, I actually will show you. Maybe I can hold the picture up to the camera here. It's really interesting. Let me just pull it up. I hope I can find it really fast. I know exactly where it's at, I think. So let me see here. I have it under. Here we go. I'll just try and hold it to the camera the proper way. Let's see here. Almost there, Melissa.
Okay. I think a picture is going to be worth it all.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, you can see it in your mind, especially in the book, the way you wrote about it. You can actually visualize it, but to actually see it is going to be another thing.
I'm really close. I'm in the right section here. I just got to find the actual. Here we go. Okay. So let me see if I can hold it to the camera. So here's the camp. So on this side of the fence is the outside world. And then right where the fence starts, but that's, by the way, that's one of the execution pits. You see the flowers start right at the fence. And that's just, and on the other side, it's the same grass, it's the whole entire same thing. So it starts right up to the inch. And then even here, you'll see, again, another fence, right? And then if you zoom out here, you can see that it doesn't start to like 1 inch inside. So I kind of realized, and maybe I'm over thinking it, but I don't think that I am, because it just is like, how could you have the same exact soil, the same exact location, and just kind of stops, and then starts in there. So the whole experience was just it was life changing for sure.
So when you came back from having that life-changing experience, what did you do differently?
I flew home about a day or two after. That was my very, very last thing I did before I flew home. And I felt like everything was just going slower. I felt like I was walking slower. I was thinking slower. I feel like the airplane was moving slower. And I know it's all kind of sounds like when I got back home to California, that traffic was moving slower. So I just felt it's so hard to explain, but just kind of like just calmer, like just calmer and more at peace and more relaxed. And I still don't, I still can't tell you even now, 2 years later, why that would have triggered that kind of feeling, or why it still does for that matter. I got to just keep unpacking it as I talk about it over the next couple of years and try and figure out why, why it shifted in me. Because the main thing was I literally left. Again, we talked about this genetic dysmorphic stuff and my plastic surgery. I left there the following day, not caring about any of that anymore. Not caring about what kind of car I was driving, what I looked like, and I don't know why it did that, but it did. I still got to try and figure it out when I keep over the years when I start thinking about it.
Maybe it just put things in perspective that these people had nothing and went through such great suffering.
Right. So that's why I say that's why I have to be really careful when I tell the story. Because okay, I did it for one night. I mean, right? Who cares? And I knew the following day I was gonna get to go home. So it's not a. So I always try and make sure I put a caveat saying that hopefully no one feels disrespected when I tell this story, because I wasn't going there for for shits and giggles. So it was for a respectful reason, and I wanted to try and experience as much as I could.
Yeah, I honestly think that you did a great job of being respectful in the book, because you talk about you could have easily brought in blankets, you could have done all this other stuff, you could have electronics, taken pictures of all the little notes that you saw written all over the place, but you didn't.
Right. Yeah, and one thing I found out too, because I did a whole entire tour of the camp during the day where there was hundreds of people around, and one thing I don't know if you even noticed, but I just found this out too when I was there, that the German government and the Israeli government, both governments, they require every single senior class out of every single school in both those countries has to visit Auschwitz as a trip before they graduate at the group trip. So that was really, and the reason why I bring it up, because I had an Israeli school and a German school that was there, and I was talking to people that worked in the camp and saying, yeah, they're here every week. There's one of the two countries' senior classes are here. It's part of their curriculum to actually go and make sure they remember it. So it's kind of cool that the German government specifically is making their seniors do that, to just remember that what happened.
So what would you say to someone that is struggling with the body dysmorphia, the pulling out their hair, of coming out as gay? Because you had 1, 2, 3 things that society normally doesn't deem as normal. What would you say to someone like that?
I think you have to just go for the ride and accept who you are. And that's, even now, I would say it's a lot easier. And even myself, it was a lot easier for me than it was, in the 80s. I personally fell in a very, very, very lucky window. I was born in 1974. I came out as gay at 20 years old when I was in 1997. So I fell right in that window where AIDS was just starting to get like a smidgen under control, where the medicine was starting to come out. So even 1 year earlier, who knows? But I remember, my first sexual encounters, I was wearing 3 condoms. I'm not kidding. I was scared to death. And that's kind of the period of time where you still had to go get an AIDS test. You had to wait 3 weeks for the results. So I was right in that lucky window where, the people before me, had much more of a harder time. And for my age group, there was no Will and Grace, there was no Ellen, so we didn't know any of this stuff. I grew up in a farm town, but now, I think it's a lot easier. Don't get me wrong, gay boys and gay girls are it's still not easy no matter what, no matter how you cut it. But I hope it's a lot easier, now than it was, for sure, for me. And even my generation, I say we didn't nearly have it as bad. There are people that are about 10 years my senior that went through the very late 70s and all through the 80s with the AIDS epidemic. So I really you have to just kind of be who you are and take the punches that come with it. And you're gay, you're gay. You can't change it. There's no matter what people think. I promise you, you can't genie blink it away. Or it's not I would have done it myself. There's no reason to make your life harder on yourself. You can say, okay, I'm going to go find a girl now, and that's going to be it. It just doesn't work that way. So the people that unfortunately had that opinion are just unequivocally wrong. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and speaking to that point, you don't have to go into it if you don't want to, but at one point you were a victim of a hate crime as well, correct?
Yeah, and that was another. Yeah, it was, and that's actually what triggered me to leave. That's when I got in the car and drove to California. So it was at the time. It was a really, really bad gay bashing that I had in my college, and I left the following morning, and even to the point where I left all my stuff behind. I had a wonderful roommate, Doug, who's still my buddy to this day, that got all my stuff to me, and that's one thing, by the way, that's still on my bucket list. I have not gone back to my college to reconfront just the campus and where it happened, and it was really a bad one too. I was like, it was a very serious one. So that's one thing still I want to do in the next couple of years. That's kind of my very, very, very last thing, to put this whole first 45 years behind me. It's kind of interesting because I just very recently saw a great documentary on Hulu about Tina Turner, who I love, and so they did a documentary, a 2-hour documentary on her, and she's obviously a very, very world-renowned singer, right, and actress, and by her own means, through her own right, has been very successful. And my point that I'm getting to is that her whole entire life, even to this interview now where she's 82 years old, what about Ike Turner? Tell me the story about Ike and what happened, how you got away, the whole thing. She's like, I'm done talking about Ike. This is like I made my own money in business starting in 1975, and this is not like he was just the beginning of my career. So she has to keep reliving the horrible. We know very publicly Tina Turner had a horrible abusive relationship where she almost got killed many times by Ike Turner. And she's like, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm 82 years old. It's like, stop asking me this freaking question. So it's like, that's kind of my point. So I want to confront everything, to hopefully get it behind me. And it's still, and even for her, it still keeps coming up. Again, I'm no celebrity like Tina Turner, but I'm saying, but she was like, she's had it. She's like, I'm done talking about this. Like, please, this is like, you're 35 years and after this has been done,
Speaking of celebrities, you actually were able to attend Jimmy Stewart's funeral. Now tell us about how that came about.
Well, I would say I crashed Jimmy Stewart's funeral, which is probably not a really nice thing to say, but I was working right across the street at a salon in Beverly Hills, consulting for them, and I knew that what the funeral was his day at the Presbyterian Church in Beverly Hills, and I was there in the window watching. I'm a big old Hollywood fan. That's my favorite genre is like the early 1940s World War II music, the movies, the whole entire thing. So I'm watching, Bob Hope go in, and Kate Hepburn go in, and Lauren Bacall go in, and Ann Miller and Kathryn Grayson, and everybody you can imagine. So I'm like, I just walked in over there and I sat in the back of the church, and I paid I love Jimmy Stewart as well, so I paid my respects to him, and I did, and I had the chapter in the book. I ended up meeting Lauren Bacall in the parking lot afterwards by complimenting a fragrance she was wearing, and we just started chatting, and then that led 3 weeks later to a very ill-fated lunch that I had with her, which is another chapter in the book, where I ruined one of my idols, but it was amazing to go to lunch with her. But that's kind of what you asked me earlier about how you kind of can chase things. You just really got to just do some bizarre things sometimes, and sometimes something happens. I wouldn't say go crashing funerals. But the one question I always get is, what do you want people to take away from your book? And it's kind of a funny answer, but totally true, which is, don't take anything from it. Please don't take anything from it. Like, literally, like, read the book, enjoy it, do the opposite of everything that was in the book, and be successful a lot faster. So I'm like, if you take anything away from the book, I'll be disappointed. It's like this. I just like how to do everything wrong in 25 chapters.
But that made you the person who you are, and I think that led up to going to Auschwitz, because I don't think if you had all those things that had happened to your life, I don't think you would have changed your perspective when you came out of Auschwitz.
Right, correct. Yeah.
So our time is almost up. Is there one last thing you want to share?
No, I think you actually hit it all. This is a great conversation. I would say just grab the book, and it is a good read. and don't take anything away from it. Just if the best thing you can do is learn what not to do and do the opposite, and it'll be great. Be in a lot better shape.
So tell people where they can find you at.
Everything actually lives on my personal website, which is just vincespinato.com, which is VINCE Spinato, which is SPINNATO.com. And we had the book on there for sale and my product line, and also I have a documentary coming out in the fall, which actually the poster's right above my head here. I just realized it's in the shot, called Skin Deep, Formulating a Legacy. And what that's about is actually showing America how products are made from conception to launch. So it's really more of a deep dive in actually how we make the products. And that's coming out in the fall somewhere. Hulu, Netflix. We don't know where, Apple. We don't know where it's going to land quite yet. But right now we're showing in the film festivals.
Speaking of your documentary, let's talk about real quick the reality show that people were shooting those sizzle reel for during the time that you were like in your book. You were talking about being part of a reality show. Is that the documentary that you're talking about? Yeah,
it actually started as a reality show and turned into a docu-series. It was going to be. I was on a couple of shows. I was on like the Housewives of Orange County and a show called Blowout and one called Workout. So just I kind of in the very, very small parts. It wasn't like part of the cast or anything, but I was kind of always developing products and that kind of thing. And long story short, Bravo was interested in developing a reality show at the time, which is again showing America how we make these products, but it turned more into a docu-series. And they've been following me around for almost just over 7 years now. So it's been a long time with cameras in my face. So it's finally ready to come out. But now it's more of it's a documentary though, and not a reality show.
So what season? I'm a real big Real Housewives fan. I did not know that. So what season were you on the Real Housewives of Orange County?
Season 2, and it was a couple episodes where it was the daughters of called OC Angels. It was the daughters of the the housewives that they were making. We developed an energy drink for them and a lip gloss line. So I was there for a couple photo shoots we did with them. I think it's like episode like 7 or 8 of season 2, and you would know it when you saw it because they're all wearing like these red dresses, and it was a pretty interesting little thing bit.
Well, Vince, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your life and writing this book because, like you said, it's entertaining, but also shows, people have to go through some stuff to get to where they're at.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
I shouldn't laugh, but y'all, you just have to pick up the book because you're not going to believe it. We just touched on part of the stuff that's happened to you.
Yeah, a lot more in there.
There's a lot more. So thank you once again for coming on, and I will put everywhere you can find him and everything about the book in the show notes. And as always, be blessed. And remember, keep chatting.
Thank you, Melissa.